You did this to me. Yes, you. Oh, I'm talking about you. I've been battling a headache all day, and I'm fairly certain it's because of these hot takes for Metaphor Refantazio. Okay, I probably just need to sleep more and drink a bit more water, but I'm gonna blame you anyways. Around these parts, we like to react to your hot takes about some of my favorite games. I asked for your hottest, your spiciest takes, and you provided. So let's have some fun. Sit back, relax, and let's react to your hot takes about Metaphor Refantazio, Atlus's latest and greatest JRPG. And we're going to start with Colin Soren OSN, who says, "Game looks cool, but I'm gonna wait for the complete edition or whatever they decide to call it." And yeah, for those who may not have been around for the rodeo of past Atlus games, what they normally like to do, or at least in the past liked to do, is release essentially the vanilla version of the game, and then a year or two down the line, release an upgraded version with more content. We went from Persona 3 to Persona 3 Fez, Persona 4 to Persona 4 Golden, Persona 5 to Persona 5 Royal. We had another version of Persona 3, not the portable one, the other version called Reload. That one didn't get a complete edition yet, but we got DLC for Episode Aegis, which was the answer from Fez, which you couldn't buy by itself. You had to buy the expansion pass alongside some music that about 4 people in the world actually cared about. But I digress, and when I was playing through Metaphor Refantazio, obviously in the back of my mind I was wondering, okay, how are they gonna milk this? Because they're either going to do, like, the Royal, the Golden, the Fez version of this game, or they're going to do DLC. And when I put the controller down when I beat the game, I was at a loss, because I'm like, how do you expand on this? Because to me at least, I loved the game so much from start to finish, and I value the pacing of the game from start to finish so much. And then as I read more of these hot takes, it started to dawn on me, if there's a section they could expand on, let's say, there's two. By the way, spoilers for the rest of this video. Just gonna let that be out there. The obvious one is the Mage College, because that Mage Academy, where we defeat Rella, is hyped up to be such an important location, and then we just have one mandatory fight there, and we largely just ignore it for the rest of the game. It is a location rife for exploration. It's like begging, pretty much, on bended knee to be an entire dungeon, and it just wasn't. So, like, that could easily be the location of something they could expand on that for some reason Will and crew have to go to in order to uncover some ancient magic, maybe. So if they do end up doing a Reload, a Fez, a Golden, or a Royal version for Metaphor Refantazio, that college would be my first bet as to where could it possibly take place. The other one, though, is at the actual end of the game when everyone just goes on a new journey. It's entirely possible, since they have the entire crew there, that maybe that journey takes them to the Magic College for whatever reason, and they have to go sort something out, and they use the Magic College as, say, like a home base, maybe. What I'm really trying to get at is that there are places that they could insert extra content in, and not really compromise the pacing of the base game. Like, you could really flesh out the Rella storyline, which, to me, I didn't mind the pacing, I quite liked it. It absolutely could be expanded on, though, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And it's the one part of the story that, in the grand scheme of things, for me, if I were to say any part of it was rushed, that would be it. I wouldn't call it rushed, per se, but it's one of those sections where you can absolutely slow it down even more and really flesh this stuff out. I'm not really expecting one of these versions for Metaphor Refantazio myself, but it is Atlus. If they smell money in the water, they will bite. Next, we have @Stock7158 with a dagger through my heart by saying, "I wish Galaka would just STF you during combat. She annoys me." Alright, like, focus up, yeah? Listen to the words I'm about to say. We do not tolerate Galaka disrespect around these parts. Yeah, I am a Galaka enjoyer. I think she is the best companion Atlus has ever had. Of the games I've played at least. She's useful, she's funny, she's not annoying to me. She participates in combat, does a lot of good damage, like more than you think she would, sometimes gives you extra tons. She's great. Okay, being serious though, I can understand why when you have a game that is as long as Metaphor Refantazio and as long as Atlus games, or at least Atlus RPGs tend to go, and you have a main companion that talks a lot during combat, which will be a significant chunk of your playtime, just sheer overexposure can create annoyance for a lot of people. So while I personally loved Galaka, I can understand why hearing the same couple of lines of dialogue over and over and over and over again can get quite annoying. We have at Sin the Sun, who says the final dungeons feel like they suffer from high expectations, though the dungeons prior in Metaphor aren't inside or revolutionary, they were decent. I would say most of the main story dungeons were rather good to me. There's an absolute heavy emphasis and focus on the combat, but with some rudimentary puzzle solving or just exploration, which I appreciated. I don't like Atlus's older dungeon design where it just felt like a bunch of linear corridors slapped together, and it was largely just a giant grind and draining your MP, so when you fought the boss at the end, you were probably limited in your resources to begin with. I don't normally like that kind of design. I tough it out though. And so for the most part, when it came to the Metaphor dungeons, I quite liked them. I didn't even mind the last couple of main story dungeons myself. They're not like the best things ever, but one, I appreciated being able to fight the optional bosses to weaken the final boss. I like that kind of stuff. I also liked getting the really good weapons for all my characters. That was quite nice. And I think if I actually had to fight all the trash mobs there, it would have been annoying for me. However, what I did was I stacked up the food item that just, when you use it for 30 seconds, you can just one-tap all the mobs with the real-time combat. So I had a whole bunch of those, and I just used them throughout the entire dungeon. Got so much XP and resources, it was comical. It was this great wave of catharsis for me, where the entire game up to that point in a lot of these dungeons was trying to beat me down and wear me down. I came in swinging, and it felt so dang good. I will still say that I don't think dungeon design itself is one of Atlus's strong suits. It's something where they still have a ways to go. I think their best attempts at dungeon design from what I've played so far, that being SMT3, I'm like halfway through that game, Nocturne specifically, P3 Portable, P3 Reload, P4 Golden, P5 and P5 Royal, and Metaphor Refantazio. Of those games, I think the best dungeon design comes from Metaphor and Persona 5 Royal, but even then, that's not saying that much. The dungeons I took the most offense for in Metaphor weren't the final dungeons, it was all the side dungeons, because I thought they were wildly mid. Those, most of the time, felt just like a bunch of linear corridors slapped together, harkening back to that older Atlus dungeon design that I don't personally like or appreciate. Feels far too repetitive, too much of a slog, as if it's trying to drain your MP so that by the time you get to the final boss, you're battling with limited resources, which is never a style of strategy or difficulty that I personally like. But to me, those were far more egregious than, say, the final couple of dungeons. Now we have At Shall Be Purified, who comes in swinging with, my hot take is that the game is too long. I'm over 60 hours in, and right before the final dungeon, I assume, please let this be the last, I just want to see the end of the game now. By too long, I don't just mean the hours, I also mean the pacing. Some parts of the story is too slow, there's too much time between story sections, I wish they would have condensed the game to be like 25% shorter. I entirely disagree. There will always be people that just prefer a shorter game experience, it's just personal preference at that point, but as I've talked about before, one of the things I hold in the highest regard for Metaphor Refantazio is its pacing. And if anything, I would have wanted the game to be a bit longer. And it's kind of funny how it's a great example of just how personal preference can really sway how you feel about a certain thing one way or the other. Because as this commenter said, they thought there was too much time between story sections. I really appreciated that. It gave me just a nice little bit of the overworld social simulator elements that I like out of Persona, but it doesn't drag out for too long, and gives me plenty of combat stuff to do and focus on to really slice up my time. To me, I thought they personally hit the best balance that they've ever hit, at least when it came to Persona, in terms of balancing out these overworld social simulator elements alongside the dungeon crawling main story sections as well. I thought Metaphor struck that balance better than all the Persona games put together. I don't even think it's close there. And whereas in Persona, I either run out of things to do right at the end of the game, or there's so much to do that I can't possibly do it all in one playthrough naturally without a guide. In Metaphor Refantazio, I thought they hit the right balance, where I only really started to run out of things to do like 2 days until the actual end of the game. Even then, if I really wanted to, I could go hunt for gold beetles. And apparently, I just missed out on the ability to make a snowman in Ultiberry. But yeah, I think if the game was any shorter, it would feel too short for me. I liked all the world building and all the development for all the characters that we ended up getting. It really fleshed the world out. Was it perfect? No, there's some locations, especially the nurse drawing locations, I wish were expanded on more. And I wish they turned those places into the side dungeon instead of like Catacomb number 5 or Here's a Giant Tower number 7. We got a forest, but we turned it blue this time. You know what I mean? It's like we had 5 different forests as shades of green, numerous different labyrinths or underground tombs, stuff like that. I wish they used those side locations from the nurse drawings for the dungeons instead. But outside of that, I thought the pacing in Metaphor was one of its strongest aspects, if not its strongest element. Maybe that's just a me thing though. Aight, buckle up, we got one here. We have @High Zeldonix 4945 who says, my hot take, the Ice Dragon boss fight wasn't that hard, people just suck at strategy. I don't remember it being that hard. I think I died to it once or twice, but I don't think it took me that long to overcome that dragon. It is rather deep into the game, but I think there is something to talk about when it comes to Metaphor Refantazio attracting an audience from Persona, because it's Atlus, but Metaphor Refantazio electing to utilize a combat system far more in line with Shin Megami Tensei than Persona, and there is a steep learning curve there, and there's a lot that you kind of need to recalibrate from your strategizing ways in Persona to fit in Metaphor, because they do not transfer over, and that's something I learned early on in the game, but I can really see some people just not being able to make that connection, that they have to completely change up the strategy. With the press turn system, the game rewards manipulating agility stats way more. Missing attacks is way more important than in Persona. Blocking attacks is way more important than in Persona. And in Metaphor Refantazio, making proper use of synthesis skills is extremely important, because a lot of the time, a big chunk of your damage, well, before Basilio, comes from those synthesis skills. I knocked off half of the Kraken human's HP bar on the way to Virga Island with a Stroll synthesis skill on hard mode. If you learn how to manage your buffs and debuffs, how to maximize your turn icons, and how to limit the enemies, it's a completely different game than if you're unfamiliar with how to do those things. Because the thing I'm learning from playing SMT3 Nocturne and also Metaphor Refantazio is that the idea of the game is that the game itself and the enemies are trying to actively screw you over and make it feel as if they're putting you in unfair positions. But your retort to that is that you can make it feel as if you're breaking the game, as if you are making the game borderline too easy, as if you're screwing these enemies over. Heisman with his final thief archetype, just whenever he dodges, removes all the enemy's turn icons. That's insane. Or if you prefer consistency, you can go for Hulkenberg, and she gets an ability where she can just put an invuln shield on a party member. Combine that with Faker's roguery so you can generate more turn icons while also dumping a bunch of debuffs on the enemies and buffs on yourself, and you can really start dropping in the damage and make the enemy not be able to do much to counter you. If you build correctly, even if they take away your debuffs or your buffs, you can reapply them without too much of an ask. It's a combat loop and a combat idea that I really enjoyed, and it got me to go and try Shin Megami Tensei because I just wanted more of that combat with the press turn system. And it got to the point where I managed to unscathe victory the Fire Dragon super boss. Like, when you learn how to manipulate the press turn system, and you learn what the game really wants you to prioritize, that being buffs and debuffs, it goes a long way, and it turns the entire combat on its head and makes it go from feeling like a slog and being overly difficult and punishing to you just feeling like this war god that has descended upon the world of Uchronia. I really enjoy it. For our final hot take of the video, we have at Rayan5256 for a bit of a bonus take for this video, who says, the MC has the option to, mostly, directly reciprocate feelings with Yufa. She's the canon romance, not Juna. Their union goes well with the game's theme, and I would love to see the people lose it over having a pagan queen. Danny is best bro-in-law. Ah yes, the shipping wars. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only shipping wars. I've talked about before, about Metaphor Refantazio's lack of a romance system and how I personally don't mind it that much, but I will say this right now, I think it goes to show just how good at writing and character development and introduction and just characterization on the whole that Atlus is, that they can introduce a character that late like Yufa and make her feel as if she was there from the very beginning. Like, if you ask me who my favorite character in Metaphor Refantazio is, that's a really hard thing for me to like zero in on because I just enjoy every character. And I think it's because of the way they wrote Will to where he is a silent-ish protagonist, but not a fully silent protagonist. He is able to have characterization and speak during a lot of these events, that it helps the dynamics between him and the rest of the party a lot to me. Though I will say I ended up using Juna way more in the endgame in my playthrough than I did with Yufa. Mainly because I had to off-spec into Faker and Trickster, and that was busted. I think one of the good litmus tests for just how well received a cast of characters are is how intense are the shipping wars. I know this sounds a bit weird, but it's kinda accurate. The more intense and more passionate people are about this subject, chances are the more well-received and well-written the cast of characters actually are, because if there was bad writing and they weren't written that well, people wouldn't be bothered to engage in these discussions. So I think it goes to show that even though Metaphor doesn't have a romance system that we've talked about before in a previous video, link in the description down below, it goes to show just how good all of these characters are. How well-written, how well-developed, and well-executed all these characters are. Especially Grius. Alright, and with that joke, I'm gonna call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, and leave a comment down below with your own hot take that you may want me to cover in a future video. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.